in this exercise, we'll be implementing the step 4, which is an optional step, create a pure model class. Now this step is applicable for our scenario. If you see, your tip description, username and user email is bind inside a composite tag called tip. So whenever you have a composite tag coming inside your XML, it indicates there is a need for you to create a pure model class, which will contain your sub tags as your properties. So in our case, we'll be creating a pure model class called tip model, which will have 3 string variables called tip description, username and user email. So what happens basically, when a tip tag will come, you will be creating a tip model object. In a respective end tag of tip description, username and user email, you will be appending the capture string to those properties, and when an end tag of tip will arrive, you will be adding the tip model inside the tips array. So basically your tip array will contain 41 tips in this scenario, and each tip is having three attributes called tip description, username, user email. So even though your tag gets interchanged, your view code will not get affected. And even if you add a new element inside this sub tag, you just have to add a new property inside your tip model and add the if condition in your did start element and did end element. Rest everything remains still the same. So your entire MVC is intact, robust and scalable. So in our case, we need to create, whenever you have a composite tag, you need to create a pure model class. So under the model folder, I'll create a new file. I'll use the same name as the tag name. So I'll say ns object, I'll say tip model, I'll say next create. Now here I'll create 3 variables. I'll be using the same name as the sub tags, so that relating them becomes simplified. So I've created a tip model. Now in SOAP tip parser, I'll be creating the pure model class object the way we used to create in the controller provider relationship. Now instead of having a tips array of string, I'll have tip as an array of tip model. So I'll be initializing the tips inside this. Now here I'll add one more tag condition called if start tag of tip comes. I don't want to make flag true because I don't want to capture everything as it is. I'll just create my tip model, pure model class data structure object, and in a respective end tag of the sub tags, I'll be associating my property tip prop data structures. So for username it will be username, user email it will be user, and when an end tag of tip comes, the composite tag arrives, I'll say tips.append tip. So now in order to use this, you need to have tip description. Okay, you need to have 3 println statements. So you'll say user name, user email. So you can have tip description is, username is, and user email is. Now let's run this application and let's see the console output. So I got all the data, but I got a count as 41, which is the exact number of tips you have in your array, and each object in an array is tip description, username and user email. So your data structure is proper and you have processed your data in an exact data structure which is needed by the controller. Now you have remained with the last step called implementing the feedback mechanism. So we'll be creating the our own protocol in this step, which will be demonstrated in the next exercise.